All right, we're live.
Right. Hello, everyone. Hi, everyone. We are going to get started in just a few seconds here, letting everybody join in to our webinar. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our King Tides program and our live stream today here at California State Parks. My name is Chrissy Moreno, and I am a statewide interpretive program coordinator for California State Parks. I have the really lucky job of being able to educate and teach and show the public how special our state parks are. I'm so excited to share this time with you today, visiting our beautiful state parks along our coast. And this special program is in collaboration with the California Coastal Commission's King Tides project. And I'm going to be telling you later on today in our program how you can participate in this community science project. The Q&A is on, so feel free to type your questions in, and we'll have a couple moderators working behind the scenes, and we'll all do our best to answer your questions today. So did you know that it's Friday the 13th? But not to worry, you're in luck today because you are going to witness a natural phenomenon. And this natural phenomenon happens every year, and it's called a king tide. It's happening this morning here, and I'm here at Cardiff State Beach down here in San Diego County. And you can see behind me that the waves have come up, and you can see in this photo that we're sharing now that the waves have come up this morning. It was high tide at 6:30 a.m. and the waves came all the way up into our parking lot, and you can see the sand and the cobblestones that washed up into our parking lot. Here along our California coast, it's a very dynamic coastline, which means it's always changing. And if you've ever been to the beach or a lake or a river or any body of water, you might have noticed that it's always changing. And there are natural processes happening along coastlines and along lakes and rivers that constantly change and shape the way they look. And some of those natural processes are waves, currents, and tides. And today we're talking about a really big tide, the king tide. And when these beaches are always changing, sometimes things happen when we put things in the way. So sometimes if we put parking lots, roads, and houses, those get in the way of our constantly changing coastline. So we're going to explore that today. We're going to explore how human actions affect our coastline, and we're going to talk today about what the future of our beaches are going to look like. We will be visiting 5 state parks today and talking to state park interpreters along our coast so they can tell us what's going on at their park during a king tide. So here's where we are going today. I'm down here in San Diego at Cardiff State Beach, and we're going to go just about a mile up the road here. We're going to just hop over to the north side of Cardiff State Beach and talk to Anita. And then we're going to be going up to Carpinteria State Beach, which is up by Santa Barbara, California. And then we're going to be heading up to the Central Coast up by Monterey, California to Point Lobos State Natural Reserve. And then we will be going up to Northern California, all the way up to the northern coast where it's really stormy today. There's some really huge waves happening at MacKerricher State Park in Fort Bragg, California, and all the way up almost to the Oregon border to Tolowa Dunes State Park in Northern California on the north coast. So those are the parks we're going to be visiting today. We're so happy to have you along. We're going to be talking about what king tides are. How do king tides help us look into the future? How is sea level rise affecting our coastline? And what are we doing to make our coastline more resilient to sea level rise? And then at the end, you can learn how to become a community scientist and participate in the King Tides project. So every year we have king tides. They are the king of all tides, the largest and most powerful tides. And what controls those tides, you might ask? The sun and the moon. So let's look at the next slide and I can show you how it works. So did you know that the sun and the moon have a really strong gravitational pull on Earth. And since water is fluid, this gravitational pull can move large bodies of water, especially our global ocean. And it can pull the water in one direction or the other. And when the water is pulled towards the coastline, that creates a high tide like we had this morning. When it's pulled away from the coastline, that creates a low tide. And these king tides, we have extreme low tides as well, which is a great time to go tide pooling. We'll talk about that later too. So these tides are so predictable and regular, and we know that when the tides are happening, just like when the sun is about to set, we know what time the sun is going to set, we know what time tides are happening, and we know when these natural king tides are happening as well. So as you can see in the next slide, the Earth is revolving around the sun, and the moon is revolving around the Earth. I'm going to pause for a moment so you could look at this animation and see, what do you notice? What do you notice as the moon is revolving around the Earth? You see those bulges happening? Well, that is the water being pulled in one direction or the other. So when the sun, the moon, and the Earth are all lined up, this is when we see king tides along our coast. And you'll see that really big bulge right as the sun, the moon, and the Earth are all lined up. These are the largest tides of the year, and they are naturally occurring, like I said, and they occur once or twice this time of year because of the alignment of the sun, the moon, and the Earth. And the sun and the moon are also closer to Earth this time of year, which really creates these really high tides, extreme high tides. So when a new or full moon occurs, which full moon's happening on Sunday, all of these factors combined create king tides. Now let's look at the next slide and see what tides are going to be looking like on a certain day. So this is a tide calendar, and this is a tide calendar for Crescent City, California, up by where Kyle is today in way northern California. And you can see that every day there are 2 high tides and 2 low tides. So everybody put 2 fingers up on your left hand and 2 fingers on your right hand and say 2 low tides and 2 high tides. Here along the California coast, we have 2 low tides, 2 high tides every day. And you can see that today at 8:58 a.m., they will be having a high tide of 8.42 feet. That's really high. And then it'll be going all the way down to a low of negative 1.3 feet at 4:13 p.m. today. So that's really extreme. If you look at the line, it goes way up and way down today. And the rest of the month, it's kind of mellow. It's kind of just goes up and down a little bit, but it's really extreme this weekend because of those king tides. All right. So we have those extreme tides. We have those king tides happening. And you may be wondering, what's so special about king tides? Well, when we get these naturally occurring king tides, we're able to look into the future. Everybody put your goggles on and let's look into the future. This is where the water might flood an area. It might move into an area. So we're able to see what the high tides of the future are going to look like, because the king tides of today are the normal high tides of the future, and that's because our sea level is rising. Our oceans are expanding and rising because of climate change. The sea level rise we're experiencing now and in the future is caused by burning fossil fuels like oil, coal, and gas. When we burn fossil fuels, and you can see on the screen now, this is the greenhouse effect. So when we burn fossil fuels, we're releasing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which acts like a blanket, and it's trapping in heat that would otherwise escape. And when we add more carbon dioxide, we're thickening that blanket. And you can see that around our Earth. It keeps our Earth warm and nice, comfortable place to live, but too much greenhouse gases, which are called rampant carbon dioxide, actually thickens that blanket too much. It heats our ocean. And when we heat our ocean, glaciers and ice sheets are melting into the ocean. That's raising our sea levels. And water also takes up more space when it warms. So when water warms, those molecules move around and expand, and that's also raising our sea levels. So if we're warming our planet and ocean, we're increasing the volume of the ocean, causing it to rise. And the amount of sea level rise we actually experience will depend on how fast we stop burning fossil fuels. So king tides are not caused by sea level rise, but allow us to experience what higher sea levels will look like. So as you can see in the next photo, this is one of our state beaches from the last king tide, and you can see it's being impacted by sea level rise. Normally you'd be able to go walk along that beach, but with the king tide, the water's going all the way up to the cliff. That's what a normal high tide is going to look like in the future. Okay, so these king tides are the highest tides of the year, about a foot or two higher than the average high tide, and that's what we expect to see with sea level rise in the next decade. We expect to see the sea levels going up at least 1 to 3 feet, depending on how much we burn fossil fuels. So this is going to help us plan for the future by looking at these king tides along our coast. So now we're going to journey up the coast, and we are going to look at how these king tides are affecting our coastline in California. So let's talk to Anita, which is about a mile up the road here at Cardiff State Beach. Hey, Anita.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Chrissy. I'm Anita, and I'm an interpreter here at Cardiff State Beach. And last year, sea level rise gave us a great glimpse into the future of what sea level rise could look like at this beach. Plus, we also had a big northwest mixed swell last year, which created a lot of water movement in this day use area. Let me pan for you with my camera. I want you to focus on our entrance gate over here. This parking lot is heavily used by many people. And to enter our park, if you focus on that yellow stanchion in the middle of the screen, that's a divider between the entrance to the park and the exit to the park. And what happened was this whole lot was full of seawater, cobbles, and it was completely flooded. And then these powerful swells pushed cobbles up under this asphalt. So that water movement, the cobbles undermined the asphalt and broke the asphalt apart. So let me share with you some pictures. This is where Chrissy is at right now, and this was from January last year. And you can see that the water almost came all the way up to the bathrooms, which are on the back side of that parking lot. This is a living dune, and this was a multi-agency project created to preserve the sand on the beach. And during storms, keeping the sand from blowing onto the busy Coast Highway 1. So during this king tide from last year, we lost a lot of sand on the beach vertically. But the dune did do its job. It held that sand in place at the top of the dune and kept it from the roadway. But by March, this is one of the entrance areas through the dune from the street parking. And a lot of these entrance areas were destroyed and made inaccessible to the public to be able to get to the beach. So there's that yellow stanchion in the middle of our Cardiff day use lot. And the gate that's appearing on the screen, that's the exit way from the park. So here the park is flooded. And then here's what it looked like just a few weeks later. All the water and cobbles washed up under that and broke that asphalt to pieces and literally made this lot be closed. This is a shot just looking south from where I am. And you can see these large chunks. We can't allow these to go into the ocean and contaminate our ocean. So we did have to hire big tractors to come in and help remove the asphalt from this area. And then already this year, this is what the park looked like at our last King Tide in November. You can see our picnic table, and there's lots of water coming under the picnic table. So here we are again. All right, Chrissy.
Thanks, Anita, for showing us those photos.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I'm really glad that we are finding some natural adaptations and solutions to protect these places. We love to come recreate. We have a ton of surfers coming here today. They love to come park on these beaches and along our road here. So I'm glad we're finding ways that we can still keep our parks open for people to come recreate. And it's a natural solution with that living shoreline. That's awesome. Thanks, Anita, for showing us
You're welcome.
And we are going to keep heading up the coast to Carpinteria State Beach, which is up by Santa Barbara, California. So we're heading north, and we are going to talk to Christina at Carpinteria State Beach.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Christina.
Hi, Chrissy. Hi, everyone. Like Chrissy mentioned, my name is Christina, and I am here at Carpinteria State Beach. We are located in the beautiful town of Carpinteria, and it's just 15 minutes south from Santa Barbara, the city of Santa Barbara. And right now, friends, I am standing right outside of our lifeguard headquarters. This is a really special building. Our lifeguards and peace officers use this building, especially during the summer months, to help keep our beachgoers safe when they're out on the shore recreating or out in the water surfing or swimming. High tides and high surf, high waves, like you're seeing behind me during our King Tide event, are putting this building at risk. So what we're going to do now is we're going to look at some photos of our lifeguard tower from the last 30 years, and we're going to compare them to photos that were taken this year in 2024. So I'm going to pull those photos up for you all. And as you're looking at the photos, friends, I want you to notice the sand surrounding our lifeguard headquarters. What do you notice? So this photo here was taken in the 1990s. And notice the sand right there behind the building. This is actually part of the building that's facing the ocean. And then this is a photo that was taken in 2024, just this past year. Take a look at what happened to the sand there. And then here's from another angle. You can see that high berm there from the 1990s. And here's what a more recent photo of the building looks like from that same angle. So what did you all notice? Take a moment to think about it. Yeah, so maybe some of you noticed that more sand is missing in 2024 versus the 1990s, right? And maybe more of the rocks are exposed. And it seems like the ocean is almost creeping a little closer to our lifeguard tower. Yeah. And if you were thinking those things, you're absolutely right. The higher the waves become, the more sand will be carried away, which is putting our building here at risk. So since this building is at risk, and we're seeing this shoreline changing, how do you think it's going to affect the people that work here, the people that visit us here at Carpinteria State Beach, and then also the animals and plants that call this place their home? How do you think it'll change or affect these things? So let's start with the lifeguard tower. So if our lifeguard tower here is put at risk, lifeguards probably will have to find another place to do their job, right? Yeah. And then if our shoreline is also changing, people may not have access to the beach like they used to, and they might have to find another beach to go and recreate or find access to the ocean, right? Yeah. And then also, friends, we have lots of animals that live right here at Carpinteria State Beach. And these animals use our shore to find food, to find shelter from predators. and also to find mates. So these shorebirds and seabirds that you see here in the picture, they might have to find somewhere else to go to access these very important things. And here we have the western snowy plover, which is a threatened shorebird species. Occasionally, this shorebird will nest here at Carpinteria State Beach. And they also like to roost here, which is rest with their friends. And then we also have a harbor seal haul out or rookery, where mother harbor seals have their babies. And sometimes you'll find seals just hauling out on the shore, regulating their body temperature and relaxing. So what is a Carpinteria State Beach doing? What is the city of Carpinteria doing to help resolve the risk of our building here and then our shoreline, where there's a couple things that we're doing. One thing is adding what one of our earlier interpreters mentioned, which is a living shoreline. And a living shoreline, what we added to our beach was some dunes. And these dunes here are just a little bit upshore from me. And these dunes were put here to help protect one of our campgrounds from flooding. And they've actually been working really well. So this is called a living shoreline. And then also in front of our lifeguard tower here, we've added what's called riprap. And what riprap does is it helps buffer those large waves. And riprap, my friends, are these really large boulders. They may look like tiny little rocks in this photo here, but they're actually really big. And again, they help prevent those large waves from removing more sand next to the lifeguard tower. So thank you, friends, for allowing me to share with you what's going on here at Carpinteria State Beach. And I'm going to turn it back to Chrissy. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. Thank you for showing us the photos of that living shoreline, our dunes, our natural dunes across California, and our natural wetlands across California are actual buffers for sea level rise. So when the water comes in, they have somewhere to go. And I love that the dunes and wetlands actually create a natural habitat for these species like the snowy plover to live, those cute little birds. So thanks for showing us that and showing us your park today, Christina. And we're gonna keep heading up the coast, and we're going up to Central California now. And we're going to Point Lobos State Natural Reserve. And we're gonna be talking to Ashley up there. She's gonna be showing us what's going on at her park. Hey, Ashley.
Hey, Chrissy. Hey, everybody. Happy King Tides. And super excited to welcome you all to Point Lobos State Natural Reserve, the crown jewel of California State Parks. And I am standing right here in the Whalers Cove parking lot. So you can see a few things behind me. Right here, right behind me is our boat ramp. And we just passed peak high tide, and water has been coming all the way up this ramp and even into this roadway right here behind me. And this parking lot is a very important meeting spot for not only park visitors, but for scuba divers as well. There are restrooms and picnic tables. And to get us started, let me show you a picture of what the boat ramp looked like during the low tide, just to give you an idea of the change in water level here. And so this is what the boat ramp looked like during our low tide. The water was pretty much all the way at the edge of the ramp, exposing those rocks that are covered in algae and other seaweeds, making it really slippery for any kayakers or divers entering in the water. But if we take a look again behind me right here, you can see this car driving and this wave coming all the way up, right up to the edge of this road. And during the last set of king tides, when we had a high swell, we came close to closing this parking lot because that water was coming across this road so often. But if we continue taking a look, this shed right behind me is where state parks lifeguards store their rescue boats. And so it is a very important access point to when these lifeguards need to get out on the water to do a water rescue. And also Cal Fire also has their rescue boat. And so if water continues coming up across this ramp across the road, then we might have to relocate not only this parking lot, but also this access point for our lifeguards. And so let's get back to those scuba divers, because this is a very popular spot for divers to come. And right behind me, there is a sign on the rocks that says divers enter here. And so let me pull up a photo here, because to show you some of these divers. And one of these divers, the one in blue, happens to be me. As a state parks diver, I have the privilege of exploring the underwater world here at Point Lobos, and I get to bring part of the underwater world to people like all of you that are tuning in this morning. And I'm hanging out with my buddy, as well as this lingcod, that's that fish on the rock. And one of the things that makes scuba diving here so awesome is because we get to explore the underwater kelp forest, which, let me pull up another photo here, looks like this. And so we have our giant kelp here that is growing out here in the cove right here, right behind me. And as big waves are traveling through this cove, this giant kelp helps to slow down the force of the waves, helping to protect our coastline. And if I move the camera just a little bit this way, right along the edge on this side of the cove is a trail right along the cliff. And if we continue having big waves crashing up against those cliffs over time, those cliffs can eventually end up falling into the water. But because of our kelp forest, the waves are slowed down and the cliffs are being protected. And there's one last thing that I like to mention about Point Lobos. The waters here are part of what is called a marine protected area, or an MPA for short. And this means that out in the water is an area that is protecting not only the animals that live there, but their habitats as well. So if you are getting out along the coastline this weekend to explore those low tides and those tide pools, make sure that you are leaving everything where you found it and taking only memories. And with that, thank you so much for joining me here at Point Lobos, and I will send it back to Chrissy.
Thanks, Ashley. Wow, what a beautiful park you work in. Thanks for sharing that with us today and talking about that access point, that boat ramp and that road right there. Your park and a lot of other state parks have these access points for public safety. And you're right, we may have to relocate some of these roads and parking lots so that the public can stay safe when they are recreating in our state park. So thanks for showing us that today. Great to see your park. Hello to the little sea otters behind you. And we're going to be heading up the coast now, a little bit further north, up to Fort Bragg, California, to MacKerricher State Park, which Kat looks like she's getting a storm up there and some huge waves. It's high tide right now, right, Kat?
It is indeed, and you're right. We are experiencing our high tide, the king tide, in addition to a storm out here right now in MacKerricher. So this shoreline can help illustrate the history of changing dynamic coastlines, and it also can help give us a glimpse into the future, especially of sea level rise. See, like we're already seeing behind me, not only are we experiencing these king tides pushing so much water up the beach, we're also experiencing really, really high waves. Behind me on this beach, you're going to be able to see the king tide and the wave coming all the way up and kind of close to this pile of sand right by my finger here. This big pile of sand is there on purpose. It's called a sand berm, and it was placed there to help protect this main road here in MacKerricher. As we are watching this crazy king tide and these huge waves pushing in, we can see how close the water really is getting to that road. I know sometimes when I look at this, it's a little easy to ask yourself, why would a road be put there in the first place? Who made this decision? Oh, believe it or not, this is actually a secondary placement of this road here in MacKerricher. This used to be a whole lot closer to our shore. I'm sure you've noticed behind me, I've got this big line of what look like little tiny sticks coming out of the sand. You believe me if I told you they're not all that tiny? Yeah, you don't have to believe me. Let me pull up a picture. I can prove to you how big these sticks are and then tell you about how they tell us more about our past. Here we go. Now, on a calmer day out here, a little bit of a lower tide, this is what our beach looks like. And if you look really, really close, guess who that is? Yeah, that's me. That's how big these giant metal posts in our beach are. And these are remnants of a rail line that used to come through what we now know as MacKerricher State Park. It was first built in 1917, and then it was paved over to become a road in 1949. When it was a railroad, it would have looked a little like this coming down the beach. In the 1980s, this trestle or this big bridge experienced a fire and huge ocean waves that ended up destroying it. So now we have this secondary placement of the road. So now that you know a little bit of the history, looking at our past, looking at where we are currently, we can see how we're constantly learning. Our coastline is always changing because of events like this and because of these huge waves. But our coast is changing, and so are we. Every time we experience something big like this, we get to learn a little bit more about our beautiful dynamic coastline. So I want to thank all of you for virtually visiting MacKerricher State Park, for learning a little bit about the past, the present, and hopefully the future of this incredible coast. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, Kat. I love that. And your park is so beautiful. And thanks for standing out there in that storm and braving that rain that's coming in and those big waves behind you. And thanks for showing us your park. That's so important to remember, that our coastline is changing. And look how much it's changed over time. That train can't go by there anymore on those train tracks. So, and that road might not be there for very much longer either. So thanks for showing us, Kat. We're going to keep on heading up the coast. And we're going to talk to Kyle, who is up in Northern California. And Kyle is facing a really big storm up there too. And I think his park might be underwater right now. Let's find out from Kyle what's happening up there at Tolowa Dune State Park.
Awesome. Thank you, Chrissy, for inviting me today for the webinar. And we are experiencing a really big storm up here on the north coast of California. And I really wanted to present from this location that's actually a background right now on my camera. And this is Tolowa Dune State Park. But unfortunately, this big storm has made it a bit too dangerous to actually be on the coastline here at Tolowa Dunes. And then also, a lot of the trails that I would use to get out to this location are completely underwater right now. So it would have been just too much for me to actually make it out to this location. But I'm still going to share some of the effects that king tides have on Tolowa Dune State Park. And I'm really excited to share this park because it is one of my favorite state parks, and that's largely due to the amount of life that exists at Tolowa Dune State Park. We have a variety of really cool dune plants that pretty much only grow out in the dunes of California and Oregon. And then also we have a variety of different wildlife that lives at the state park. And I'm going to be talking about one of our very special friends, and I'm actually going to pull up a picture And our special friend was actually mentioned earlier down at Carpinteria State Beach, and that is our snowy plover. So this is the western snowy plover, a super cute and really tiny shorebird that you can find on the coast of California and near different bodies of water. And this western snowy plover actually has some pretty cool little bracelets that you can see on its legs. Well, these bracelets aren't only to look cool, but they also are used for research. So these bracelets help us research and learn more about the western snowy plover and its behaviors. And something that we've learned about the western snowy plover is actually that it is a threatened species here in California. So its population isn't as robust as it used to be. But another piece of information that we've learned about the western snowy plover is that it loves to nest and lay its eggs right out there on the beach and just in the open sand. And you can actually see that their eggs kind of blend in with the sand around them. And this is to make sure that they're nice and protected. But they just lay their eggs right on the sand. And you can see behind me on this background that we have a good amount of sand where these snowy plovers can lay their eggs and nest at our state park. But just right this direction, you can see that that sand stops pretty abruptly. And that's largely due to this grass that's growing all over this dune right behind me. And this grass is called European beach grass. Huh, I mean, if it's growing in California, shouldn't it be called California beach grass? Well, there's a reason why it's called European beach grass, and it's because it's not originally from California. It's actually originally from Europe. And this grass was brought over to California and planted along our coastline. And what we're seeing right behind me is this plant acting in a very invasive manner. So we've categorized this plant as an invasive plant because it's taken over the entire coastline right here. And it's taken over a lot of that sandy habitat or those sandy locations where those snowy plovers can actually lay their eggs. And I brought up just a quick definition of invasive plants versus our native plants here. You can see invasive plants are introduced plants that harms its new environment. And here we're seeing that this European beach grass is completely taking over the beach right behind me. Now, this picture was taken on a low tide. And with the king tides right now, the water is coming all the way up to where this beach grass is. So this complete beach, all of this sandy habitat that we would have western snowy plovers laying their eggs is completely underwater right now. And this raises a real problem for those snowy plovers. This means that they don't have anywhere to lay their eggs and raise their youth. So take a moment and think, what can we do about this situation? Because we sure want our western snowy plovers here in California, but what should we do about this beach grass that's covering all of this good sand that those snowy plovers should be nesting on? And this beach shouldn't really be growing in California. Well, there is something being done about this to help out the snowy plover, and it's being carried out by volunteers. And I want to mention volunteers of all ages. Right here, we have some of our local volunteers and other volunteers that have traveled all from the West Coast to Tolowa Dune State Park, and they're working with a local volunteer organization known as Tolowa Dunes Stewards that are stewarding the landscape. As well, you can see there's a lot of other people, and these people are a part of different youth groups throughout California, and they are volunteering as well to remove this beach grass and open up more of that sandy habitat, which is native to this area. And they're doing it just in the old-fashioned way with manual labor and shovels and different tools and pulling out this beach grass because it shouldn't be growing within the state park. And by pulling this beach grass, they're exposing more of that sandy habitat and bringing back the western snowy plover, or allowing for that western snowy plover to have spaces here at Tolowa Dunes State Park. And this is something that's been going on for about 10 years, or a bit longer than 10 years up here on the North Coast. And we're already starting to see positive outcomes from this. We're starting to see western snowy plovers come back to this beach and actually have successful fledglings, or successful nest, and the eggs hatching and those birds flying off and starting off their life. So within the past 2 years at Tolowa Dunes State Park, we've seen 12 snowy plovers nest and have successful nest in the first time for over 40 years because of some of this restoration work. So it's been a really exciting time, and we're starting to see that this park is becoming more resilient to the changes of our coastline. So thank you for letting me share this story about the volunteers and the snowy plover here at Tolowa Dunes State Park, Chrissy. It's been a really exciting phenomenon that's happening.
I love that. Thanks, Kyle, for sharing about your park. I love hearing that the snowy plovers are coming back and are, they have that habitat on the beach to nest and raise their fledglings. So thanks for showing that. And thanks for showing about the volunteers. And all of you can volunteer in our state parks as well. I highly recommend getting out there and joining these restoration events, these cleanup events we have along our state parks, and getting out there and taking part in restoration, volunteering, community science. And now we have a chance to talk about a community science project that's going on called the King Tides Project. And that's through the California Coastal Commission, who we are in partnership with for this event. And you can get out there if you're along the coastline, and this is happening all over America, all over the world, actually, this King Tides Project. So wherever you're at along the coastline, you can look up a King Tides Project in your area. And specifically for California, we have the King Tides Project through the Coastal Commission. And you can scan the QR code on your screen now to find out more about how to participate. But you can bring a phone during the high tides, and be careful out there when you do that. Bring your phone and you can snap the shore to see the future. And scientists and planners are using this information of what these king tides look like to help us plan for the future. So you can be a community scientist, get out there. And if you are going to visit the coast during the king tides, here are some ways you can stay safe. Always make sure you never turn your back on the ocean. You always have one eye on the ocean to make sure that if a wave comes in, you can get out of the way. Be extra careful when you walk on slippery rocks or near big waves. And it's really a good idea never to really walk on any rocks where waves are crashing on top of. You don't want to get knocked off that rock and go into the ocean. These coastal cliffs along our coast are eroding. So always leave space near leave space when walking near them. So leave an area away from the cliff that you can walk by safely if any rocks or cliff falls onto the beach. And then these king tides are an awesome way to get out there and see the extreme low tides happening as well, and look at the tide pools and see the different animals that are living in the tide pools. So if you visit the coast during low tides, remember to respect the tide pools. They are protected, and you never want to collect any species from the tide pools. Always leave the animals and shells and rocks where they are, and to walk gently, not to step on any plants or animals or turn over any rocks. And you can scan this QR code here on this screen as well, so you can learn how to be a good tide pooler when you're out there looking at the tide pools. Okay, so make sure to stay safe out there, be a good tide pooler, and let's bring everyone back on screen one more time. Great to see everyone in your park. It looks like we might have a minute or two for any questions. And I know our awesome moderators have been working behind the scenes to answer a lot of the Q&A questions out there. But let's see here. It looks like sometimes we get a question, and it looks like this question might have come in. about what we can do about the sea level rising. So as our sea levels rise along our coast, what are some things that we can do to help? And we talked about participating in community science. I talked about volunteering and joining those restoration events. But the one easiest thing you can do, and it makes a really big impact, is talk about it. Talk about climate change with your family and friends. And you can talk about it, what you learned today about climate change and sea level rise. And I know a lot of you are learning about it in school as well. So talk about it with your family. It makes a really big difference the more we talk about it and the more we all make little changes in our life. The more we can vote for change to use renewable energies and get away from fossil fuels makes a big difference. And we're going to see sea level rising for decades to come, but you can make little differences in your life to make big changes. So just keep talking about it with your friends and family. Tell them about what you learned today. And it was great to see everybody out there today in your state parks. I really appreciate you all participating. And I thank you all for coming and watching our King Tides live event today. And I hope you get out there and enjoy your state parks wherever you're at. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining. Bye, everyone.